We've just had Anzac Day here in Australia and New Zealand. It is interesting to note how Anzac Day has changed over the years. When I first became involved in Anzac Day, I was working with the Department of Veteran Affairs as a counsellor, and I was working a lot with, obviously, Vietnam veterans at that particular time. What I noticed was that when I attended Anzac Day, this would be some nearly 20 years ago now, there were a number of people, but the numbers were relatively small. Just a few hundred people would gather in Adelaide around the memorial, and there would be speeches, and there would be trumpet blowing, and there would be this activity happening, which at the time I found quite emotional, primarily because I've been working with those people that have been impacted by war, and I was able to see the impact that their experiences had on them and how they were therefore conducting their lives, which, and to a large extent, I noticed that those lives had been changed dramatically by their experiences of fighting in Vietnam. Over the years though, I've noticed a change. I've noticed that the numbers have increased significantly, and there was, interestingly enough, there was an article that I just read that was that talked about this to some extent, and this article though was in 2000, it was a couple of years ago, and I think it was 2021, and it depicted a decline in interest in the services. So I saw this decline, a few numbers back many years ago, and then I noticed that the numbers over the years started to increase quite dramatically, and then we came across the pandemic. Of course, the numbers decreased during the pandemic, but this particular article in The Guardian indicated that the numbers themselves had changed significantly over the years. So an estimated crowds at dawn services fell by about 70% between 2015 and 2019. And that was significant because the numbers were extraordinary up until that point. So the period that I'm talking about, those numbers had increased and then they'd waned a little bit. But what has interested me is the fact that when I went to the dawn service at Semaphore, which is a local beach here in Adelaide, I was surprised by the number of people. There were thousands there. There were lots of young people, lots of kids with their parents. All these people have got up at 5 o'clock in the morning to be there for the 6 o'clock service. It was amazing, the number of people that had attended. And I'm curious as to why this is happening. I decided to go because I'd met this lovely young man by the name of Ben, who was a returned serviceman from Afghanistan. And he talked about what it meant for he and his mates to be there. And even though he wasn't involved in direct fighting, he was situated in Afghanistan, and to some extent had suffered some mental well-being issues as a result of his deployment. I was curious about what he thought about going to Afghanistan and how it conflicted a lot with what he imagined it would be like and the reality of actually being there. A lot of young people, and when I spoke to Vietnam vets when they were young and they went to war, they had these two conflicting versions as to what war would be like.
Range it, 1460. Top of the feature, one wrist left.
They saw it as something that they could do that's heroic, that is about their manhood, their maleness, whatever you like to call it, and they thought that they were going there for an adventure. When they get there though, they find that it's anything but the adventure they had imagined.
Where's it coming from? Roger! Victor Alpha, we believe one possible KIA.
The other one to be confirmed. We are moving back to the south to establish an HLZ over.
Well, they're close, boss. They're close, boss.
It's a horrific experience, and most people who do go to fight suffer accordingly. So why is it that we celebrate Anzac Day? A day which refers to a battle in Gallipoli. I am confused as to what people find interesting and exciting about Anzac Day. But on reflection, maybe it's more about us celebrating, or perhaps I should say thinking about, what war means. The sacrifices that these young men make, and for us to be mindful that we should never, ever go there again.
It was the worst time of my life. It was absolutely horrendous, so no positive feedback, getting absolutely smashed all the time. So lots of running of the bayonet assault course, just being, always told, you guys are shit, you're never going to make it, what are you doing here? And that just wiped a lot of people out, so I remember one of the staff standing up and saying, if you want to quit, come forward now and you'll be out of here today. And guys quit on our course, and then, we got all the way down to 15. So, but for me, I trained 3 years for this. I put my life on hold. I had nothing to go back to. I literally burnt every bridge behind me. So for me, there's no point in going home.
At a time when we're reflecting greatly on China, the Indo-Pacific region, and the potential for war, and the fact that war will no longer necessarily be fought in other countries, war may be fought on our own lands. So is there something resonating with us? Is there something that we're thinking about as a communal thing about what it means to go to war? And are we looking at Anzac Day as a sort of day to remember what happens when we do? The impact that war has on all of us, and the impact that war potentially may have on our children. I don't find the services necessarily emotional as I did many years ago. I find them a reminder of where we've been, and that we should never, ever go there again. Maybe that's why we turn up, to remember what we need to avoid. That war is catastrophic. War damages people. War is not an expression of maleness, and it's not an expression of courage. It is a place in which people die, unnecessarily die, because they've been sent there by politicians. And maybe the warning for all of us is that we need to be able to tell our politicians that this Anzac Day is a reminder that that is a place, war, being a soldier, they're places that none of us should ever have to go.
Recognising that the conflicts, the wars that they were sent into by politicians were sometimes contested and sometimes controversial.
We need to be mindful that war is not about glory. It's about sadness. It's about the loss of unnecessary life. And we've been to many fights where we've simply followed America, the UK, we've followed these other people into their battles, and we should have avoided those, and we should avoid them in the future. Maybe that is what this message is about. Maybe that's why so many people attend, to remind themselves and their children that this is a place in which we should never go. Thanks for being here with me, everybody. Take care, look after yourselves, and be safe.